Hey everybody, welcome into To The Point. We are back again with another of our NFL divisional preview podcasts as we get closer and closer to the NFL season. Today we will talk about the NFC North. A lot of interesting things to dive into with this division. We'll be doing the AFC East later in the week. So we're grinding down. We're doing the NCAA preview next week. So lots of NFL content on the horizon. And as I said today, we're talking about the NFC North. Just a refresher, the NFC North has been a staple in one particular state for the last, honestly, 20 plus years. Even longer than that, because Brett Favre played for nearly 20 years before that in Green Bay. It's been Green Bay, Wisconsin. This division has been dominated by one team. Unless Aaron Rodgers had an injury-plagued season, more often than not, the Green Bay Packers were winning their division, the Detroit Lions were finishing in last, and the Bears and Vikings would flip-flop in which position they want to be in. Now, there's the outlier years where Minnesota got to the NFC Championship game with Case Keenum and the Minnesota Miracle, but you get the point. But we're in a new day here in the NFL. It's a new day in Green Bay because Aaron Rodgers is a New York Jet. If you're not following Hard Knocks, if you haven't been following social media, he's been to Knicks games, Yankees games, Rangers. You saw Taylor Swift, seeing things on Broadway. And I don't blame him because he lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin for 20 years, which I like to make fun of cities for having nothing to do, but Green Bay might have less nightlife, might have less to do than Salt Lake City, Utah. And that's saying something. Salt Lake City if you forgot what Salt Lake City has to offer, I'll remind you. Mormons, cold weather, and darkness. That's it. Green Bay, darkness, more darkness. If you actually look up the this is actually a fun thing to research. If you look up the sun and how often it goes over each place in the wintertime, starting in about end of September, it's sunny in Green Bay for like 8 hours a day, maybe less. Woof. I know it seems like a lot even around here. It seems like it's less than that in New Brunswick. It really isn't. Green Bay is what it is. But Aaron Rodgers is gone, and this division is up for grabs. Even though Green Bay did not make the playoffs last year, the Minnesota Vikings won the division. Every year you go and you have Aaron Rodgers, you think you have a chance. So let's start with Green Bay. Matt LaFleur remains as the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. They retain their offensive coordinator. They keep their defensive coordinator. But a lot of things have happened. Number one, Jordan Love is their quarterback. Jordan Love is their quarterback, and he's been on the roster for 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers. Playing at North Dakota State, being a good college football player, going in the first round. He sat there. He's been in Aaron Rodgers where he waited his turn, and now he's getting his opportunity. I watched him in the preseason on Friday night. In his 2 series of work, he looked pretty solid. Do I think he's going to be Aaron Rodgers? No, but few are in the history of the sport. Green Bay was a team that they were like the New Orleans Saints where they didn't have money to spend. They have been hamstrung with Aaron Rodgers contracts, David Bakhtiari getting a huge deal. Basically, they don't have money to spend. And Jordan Love is an addition because he was a backup last year. And the rest of their ads, they added Lucas Van Ness, the 13th overall pick in the draft, so they hope he can be a good pass rusher. Luke Musgrave, the 42nd pick in the draft, who's a tight end out of Oregon State, who was really good last year. Jaden Reed, they picked him at number 50, wide receiver out of Michigan State. And they took Sean Clifford in the 5th round. He was a quarterback at Penn State. They're hoping he can be the backup to Jordan Love this upcoming season as he battles for the job in training camp. So not a whole lot of additions. A lot of subtractions. Obvious one, Aaron Rodgers. Alan Lazard, wide receiver for 5 years in Green Bay, departed the organization to follow Aaron to the Jets. Mercedes Lewis is now a Chicago Bear. Randall Cobb is a New York Jet. Robert Tonyan is a Chicago Bear, another tight end gone. Adrian Amos is a free agent, didn't get picked up. Dean Lowry is gone, and Jaron Reed. Huge parts of their team are no longer there. Aaron had a lot of friends. He's an enigma. He's not everybody's cup of tea. But a lot of guys they said, okay. And Aaron recruited guys. Right away, these guys started coming with him. We feel it's a good idea to go with Aaron to the Jets. We have a better chance to win. And now we see what's happened. Strengths of this team. Number one, I think something that gets overlooked when you have a great quarterback, maybe other than Andy Reid in this realm, is Matt LaFleur is a good coach. Matt LaFleur is a good offensive coach. He runs good schemes, and I don't think he's gotten the credit for being a good offensive coach because he's had Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, the person who got the majority of the credit has been Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett got the job in Denver. It doesn't go well, but now he's Aaron Rodgers' offensive coordinator again. Matt LaFleur worked his way up. He got the job in Green Bay. And under Matt LaFleur / Nate Hackett, Aaron Rodgers won back-to-back MVPs. The player gets credit, and also the coach gets credit in that regard for that type of success. So we can't forget about that. The first 3 years LaFleur was with Aaron Rodgers, they had top 10 offenses. They did not last year for the first time. But we also got to remember, Aaron Rodgers didn't play all that well last year. The Green Bay Packers had some problems. David Bakhtiari was out for most of the season. They had some injuries. Christian Watson missed early parts of the season. And when he came back, he really didn't find his stride until the back half of the year. So I just wanted to say that up front. I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach, and we can't forget about that when it comes to this team. Another strength is the offensive line. This offensive line has played together before, and they're returning a group that played together last year. David Bakhtiari, when healthy, is one of the best left tackles in football. Now, this was a report yesterday from Adam Schefter. Bakhtiari, his knee is repaired, it's rested, and he's a full participant in training camp with no restrictions, no pain. So hopefully it goes the whole year, and that will be such a benefit to Jordan Love. But if he's healthy, it's a game changer. Elton Jenkins at left guard. He's been there a number of years. Josh Myers, the center. John Runyon, right guard. Right tackle, Zach Tom. To me, it's their biggest strength, is their offensive line. Because they just have cohesion. They pass block pretty well. They run block especially well. And we'll pivot into that. But again, Jordan Love, by the standards of the league, is not a young quarterback because he's entering his 4th year. The Green Bay Packers following this season will have to make a decision whether they want to pick up the 5th-year option on Jordan Love or decline it and let him hit free agency. It's already that decision time because he's been on the bench that long. But when it comes to snaps, When it comes to in-game, he's a pup. He's a miniature Dachshund. He's a small fish in a big pond. So he having an offensive line, having some players that keep you steady, where you feel comfortable, you can make throws in the pocket. That is huge for a young quarterback in snap years. There's a new term, snap years, dog years, snap years. That's Dan Orlovsky. You can steal that if you want it. That's for everybody because I like to share. Another strength of this team, the running back room. A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones. Two-headed monster. Both guys do very different things, and both guys are good at running the football. A.J. Dillon might as well be just a huge rock. He gets the football, he runs into a hole, and it's no fun for you. Those big defensive tackles don't want to take on A.J. Dillon. He's the closest thing to Derrick Henry in the NFL when it comes to a running back. I even think more than Nick Chubb, just because of how big he is. He's 6'3", 6'4", running back, just thick as hell, and he's strong. Strong as an ox. Aaron Jones had his worst year as a pro last year. He led the NFL in fumbles and fumbles lost, but it was one bad year. I trust he can find his game again. He's very good at catching passes out of the backfield. And I think Aaron Rodgers got frustrated with him last year. But throughout Aaron's career, Aaron Jones was huge for him. Was huge in the red zone. Was huge on third downs. He'd throw it to him in the flat. He'd find a way to pick it up. He knows how to take on punishment. He's strong. He's tough. Again, good offensive line with a rookie quarterback. Then you have two great running backs. So what I'm getting to is the DNA of this team, they have good wide receivers. We'll get to that in a second. But the DNA of this team is not going to be, let's throw the ball down the field 40 times a game. And if it is, they're not going to win, in my opinion. Jordan Love can throw, but I think the key is you run the football successfully, which will lead to play action opportunities for Jordan Love to hit easier throws early on the season, gain confidence, and then you can start to let it rip a little bit. Then you can take a shot down the field to Christian Watson, who's one of the fastest receivers in football. We saw it last year. Towards the end of the year, he started to get hot. Aaron Rodgers would throw him a go ball at least once a game, and that's his specialty. That's where he shines. But early on, if you establish the run, you keep the downs to a minimum. If it's 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3, it creates problems for the defense. Because you could still run it because it's 2nd and 3 if you want it, but play action, Jordan Love, bootleg, left or right. The linebackers are up in the box, create space in the middle of the field for him to hit quick throws to Luke Musgrave, who I think the rookie is going to have a great season in this offense. He's going to get a lot of catches, which will lead for opportunities for Christian Watson, for Romeo Doubs. So that's the identity of this team, and I think it's smart that they have a team that's built to help a rookie. Even though I'm going to call him a rookie because to me he's a rookie quarterback. He's played a few games here and there. He's the defined starter for the first time in his career. That's a rookie to me. So that's a strength. The Green Bay Packers, by Pro Football Focus, ESPN grades, all were predicted to have a top 10 defense in the NFL last year, and it vastly underperformed. But it could, I look at it at this defense, and it should be a strength. They should be able to bounce back. In the secondary, Jair Alexander is one of the best corners in football. Has dealt with some injuries, but he's great. Rasul Douglas and Eric Stokes with Darnell Savage. That back end, that secondary, Douglas is a ball hawk. The guy just knows how to get the football. 4 interceptions last year, 13 passes defended. Eric Stokes, not a guy who gets a whole lot of interceptions at Georgia, but he's still really, really good. Jair had 5. This secondary, easy. 10 to 15 interceptions this year. You look up front, Kenny Clark, beast at defensive end. Devontae Wyatt, a draft pick. Preston Smith, they still have on this team. Lucas Van Ness is going to get snaps. Devondre Campbell had a breakout year. Quay Walker, and then Rashawn Gary, who had 6 sacks. I think this team defensively can be very good. They were not last year. And that's the crazy thing, is you look at it and say, why weren't they with this type of talent? But I trust that they will turn it around. And maybe it's a stupid thought, but they have the people to do it. They have the pieces in place to be a good defense. And if you have a good defense with strong pillars elsewhere, and if your offense isn't going to be the strength of your team, you keep yourself in games. Now, weaknesses on this team. I saw Jordan Love play in the preseason. He played well, but it's the preseason. We don't know anything about Jordan Love, other than he's a first-round pick that sat on the bench, and you're hoping he's going to be good. But he's an unknown because you need to see him week in, week out, and nobody can have that confidence, and not even the Green Bay Packers can be certain of what this guy is. So to me, it's a weakness to be determined. It could be a strength because he could be great. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. I don't think the Packers have a true, defined number 1 receiver. I worry about these guys creating separation. The best receivers in football, Julio, when he was at his prime, you create separation, you create throws for your quarterback, even when you think they're not there. Justin Jefferson can be, it looks like he's dead to rights. Kirk Cousins doesn't have a throw. He will launch it up, and Justin Jefferson will make the play happen because he's that good. Tyreek Hill, I could go through the names. I think Green Bay's receiving core is good, but not great. And when I think this team could be really good, I think Green Bay is being vastly underrated and underappreciated for how good this roster is. We'll get to the hype train later and a certain team in this division that's really getting highly touted after really earning nothing, not making the playoffs either last year. There's a little hint of who I'm going to talk about. But their offensive line is strong. They have the same coach in place who's a good coach. They have a defense that can be better. They have good defensive pieces on this team. And I look at the receivers. Is Allen Lazard better than Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs right now? I would say yes. But either of those two guys are younger than Lazard and have the potential to be better because he's what he is, Allen Lazard, as a receiver. Randall Cobb is Aaron Rodgers' little linchpin. Again, that's no big loss. Tanyan, Musgrave. Tanyan, it wasn't available enough. He goes to the Bears. He's going to be their second tight end behind Cole Kmet. So the losses to Green Bay, other than Aaron, which he wanted and I think the team wanted because they were sick of him. They were sick of his drama. Every offseason, it's a debate. And I think they want to see what they have in Jordan Love before they have to make a decision on whether they want to pay him a bunch of money. So, my big thing here on Green Bay is they're in the NFC, which is by far the weaker conference. They're in the NFC North, which is an interesting conference in and of itself, an interesting division in and of itself because there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of unproven, there's a lot I want to see it from a lot of these teams. Really, and every team in this division you could say is getting more respect than the Packers. The Bears, you're hearing Justin Fields MVP chatter from the mainstream media. Minnesota won 13 games last year. And then there's the team that will keep to the end who are on a pedestal currently and being talked about like a team that could potentially get very deep in the playoffs. And maybe they will. But losing Aaron Rodgers to me does not signal an end of an era of competitive football for the Green Bay Packers. Are they going to be as good as they were, say, 5 years ago? No. But the Green Bay Packers were a 500 team last year. When Russell Wilson left Seattle, Seattle wasn't a very good team. People forget that. He was traded. Oh, he's going to be the savior in Denver. He wasn't a great quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is going to the Jets. I think Aaron Rodgers was better with Green Bay than when Russell Wilson left for Denver, but he wasn't playing at an elite level last season. He wasn't great. He lost the opening game of the season, got crushed by the Vikings. He could have won the last game of the season at home at Lambeau, and he loses to the Detroit Lions. That never happens to Aaron Rodgers. So, Green Bay is interesting to me because nobody sees them coming. They have the cloak of invisibility in Harry Potter to me, where there's no expectations. Jordan Love's going to be bad. Aaron's gone. He's with the Jets. Who cares about the Packers? That's a dangerous team to me. Not to win it all, but to make the playoffs. And something I consider sprinkling a little money on. Because when nobody thinks it will happen, it always happens in the NFL. So just something to think about. But I think Green Bay's in better hands than most people are talking about. Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears, the worst team in the NFL last season. They ended up trading out of the first pick, traded that to the Carolina Panthers, getting first-round picks. Next year, they got a first-round pick in the 2023 draft. They took Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, the tackle. So Matt Eberflus is back for another year. Justin Fields is back under center. And the biggest thing that they did this offseason was they acquired DJ Moore in the trade for basically Bryce Young for the first overall pick. Justin Fields finally has a number one receiver. He finally has adequate talent to play with on Chicago. But not just that, after having the worst record in football, not spending a whole lot of money, Justin Fields still on a rookie contract, the Bears went out. Signed Tremaine Edmonds, linebacker from the Buffalo Bills. Has been very productive, was part of their turning around their winning ways in Buffalo. Add TJ Edwards from the Eagles. Mercedes Lewis comes over from Green Bay. Robert Tonyan, as I mentioned. Nate Davis, the tackle from Tennessee. Deontay Foreman from Carolina. And they also added Noah Sewell in the draft out of Oregon. So, Chicago. Where are the Bears? Oh, the Bears, where are they? Well, they're in an interesting position because they're bringing back the similar faces. They could have drafted Justin Fields' replacement, but they did not, which I think is smart. But they go into this season, Justin Fields' third season in the NFL, and I think there's a lot of pressure in Chicago for this team to be competitive and for the Bears and for Justin Fields to show that he can be their quarterback of the future. That he can be the guy to lead them for a number of years. Because if he does not show it this season, I think the Bears will be looking elsewhere for quarterbacks this spring, the 2024 NFL Draft. Last year, his best receiver was Darnell Mooney. And nothing against Darnell Mooney, but he's more of a deep threat receiver. He's not relied upon often. But now DJ Moore's a number one. He played in Carolina, so he doesn't get as much he doesn't get name dropped all that much. You don't see him. But he was phenomenal. And he played with bad quarterbacks in Carolina and made it work. Playing with Sam Darnold last year and playing with Baker Mayfield and PJ Walker. And looking at his statistics last season, he had 888 yards receiving. Last year, he had 1,157. The year before, 1,193. So prior to last year, he had 3 years over 1,100 yards receiving. He only had 63 catches last year. 87, 66, and 93 the previous 3 years. He needs to get the football more, and I believe he will in Chicago. In his first preseason game, he caught one pass. It was a screen. He took it for 62 yards and a touchdown. But he's a guy, you throw a ball down the field, you need a play. DJ Moore's your guy. Is he better than Justin Jefferson? No. Is he better than... I always go to Justin Jefferson first because I just think he's by far the best. Is he better than Jamar Chase? No. Is he better than Tyreek Hill? No. But I think he's in that mix of, say, 5 to 10 with a guy like Terry McLaurin. I think he's better than CeeDee Lamb, personally. Michael Thomas hasn't played, so his work has been better than Michael Thomas. But I think he's in that 5 to 10 range of receivers. And he is a number one to me. So you get DJ Moore, you keep Darnell Mooney, because he is a good receiver, and you like him, and he's got connection. They traded for Chase Claypool with the Steelers, which didn't love that. But you pair that with Cole Kmet, Robert Tonyan, and Mercedes Lewis. They have a very good tight end room. So looking at the strengths, they help Justin Fields. I look at the GM, Ryan Poles, and what they've done. About time you help your quarterback. 2 years of not helping him. 2 years of sending him out there and saying, our roster sucks. Our defense sucks. We're not spending any money, but we expect you to be good. And that's what happened. That's what happened with Justin Fields. Again, they don't know if he's any good because they haven't helped him achieve anything. They just said, we're going to throw you to the wolves, and whatever happens, happens. Well, bad shit happened for Justin Fields. He got hit a lot last year. You look at his statistics from last year, it's more about his running that gets talked about, because that's what he had 1,143 rushing yards last year with 8 touchdowns, 7.1 yards per carry. He had 160 carries. That's the most in NFL history in one season. I mean, it's quite crazy. He only had 2,200 yards passing. So what needs to happen is that Justin Fields continue to use your legs because you have that, and it's a skill that you need to use. When a play breaks down, you can get out of the pocket and get 10 yards on a scramble. That's awesome to have, and every quarterback needs it in today's game. But what he needs to do is see that my receivers are better than they were before, and I need to give them the football. I can't take off and run every play. I need to trust my arm. I need to trust my teammates to make a play for me, and let's ride. And having guys like DJ Moore, I think the second most important receiver on this team is Cole Kmet, personally. Tight end, I think he's scratching at the surface of how good this guy can be. He's big, he's physical. He had 544 yards receiving last year and 7 touchdowns. So him and Fields have a rapport, but he had 50 catches. That number should go up. Those yards should go up. Keep the touchdowns. 7 touchdowns for a tight end, really good. But he's only 24. He's big, he's smart. I like him a lot. But you pair him, and then Tanyan's going to get less snaps. But Tanyan had 53 receptions last year, 470, and 2 touchdowns. So 2 tight ends that know production. And I think for, even though Justin Fields is entering his 3rd year, having that tight end on a team that you trust is great. You look at Mahomes. Who does he go to? Kelsey. Brock, any quarterback for San Francisco, doesn't matter. And it's a key 3rd down. They throw the ball to George Kittle. Over history, John Elway hits Shannon Sharp down the field for a big play because you just trust the big target that's going to make that play. Tight ends are becoming more and more valuable because they're so athletic, because they can do so many things. Again, Cole Kmet is in that freakazoid category for me because he can do it all. Block, receive, whatever you want him to do. I don't love, like I said, Chase Claypool. I didn't like that trade from the Steelers for the Bears. To me, I wish him all the best because he's a Canadian, and you want to see Canadians succeed, of course. But he's been a problem. He was a problem in Pittsburgh. He cared more about himself than he did about the team. I remember this game, I believe it was Steelers and the Washington football team. This was like a COVID game. It was on a Wednesday afternoon, if you can remember this game. It was a weird game. And Big Ben Roethlisberger, still the quarterback, hits Chase Claypool on a 3rd down for 8 yards, and they needed 7. And there's only 30 seconds on the clock, no timeouts. Instead of getting up, passing the ball to the ref so that they could spike it and stop the clock, Chase Claypool spins the football and points forward to signal 1st down. Total lack of awareness. Total just self-centered egomania and not focusing on the team. He drops the ball. He's injured. He complains. He focuses on himself. I wish him all the best. I hope he has a great year in Chicago. But they gave up a 2nd-round pick for him. And Mike Tomlin sets a culture better than anybody else, maybe better than anyone named Belichick. And it didn't work there. He's going to go, Matt Eberflus is going to lay down the law for Chase Claypool. I don't know. Hopefully he's great. That's a concern for me. Offensive line should be improved. Another positive. Darnell Wright, they take. Nate Davis, they brought over from Tennessee. Cody Whitehair remains the center. They signed Alex Leatherwood, who used to be with the Las Vegas Raiders, who was a 1st-round pick, who's hoping he can break through if they need him to. Braxton Jones has been at left tackle for some time. He's been very good. It's never been a huge strength of this team, but you have an offensive line that's decent. You look at Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman. It's a pretty damn good running back room. Herbert is more athletic. I like Foreman at running back. I don't know why Carolina let him leave. To me, he's a guy that is not going to catch a whole lot of balls out of the backfield. But he had 914 yards rushing last year and only 203 carries. 5 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a clip. He's bounced around. He's played for Houston. He's played for Tennessee, Carolina. Now he's with the Bears. That's the life of a running back. But to me, he's valuable. I'd use him more in the red zone. And then Khalil Herbert, he caught a screen pass on Saturday, and he took it to the house himself. So a two-headed monster at running back, improved receiving core, a decent offensive line that could be really good. The weakness of this team is the defense. I like Tremaine Edmonds signing Smart. They needed a guy that is all business, that's been on a winning culture in the NFL, in Buffalo, and they paid him a lot of money, but he came over. He had 66 tackles last year, a sack, and an interception, and he's 25, so he's still in his prime. Jack Sanborn, they've had for a few years out of Wisconsin. I still think he's got more in there. But I like Eddie Jackson, but he's getting a little long in the tooth. Jaquan Brisker hasn't exactly panned out. And I look up front, getting pressure on the quarterback. Who's going to do that for the Bears? They signed Yannick Ngakoue late in training camp. He's their best pass rusher. By far. He's by far their best pass rusher, and he's up there in age, and he wasn't getting a contract. Andrew Billings, Justin Jones, DeMarcus Walker. TJ Edwards comes over. DeMarcus Walker had 7 sacks. He had a good year. Speaking, Billings had 1 sack. Justin Jones, none. You look at Yannick Ngakoue, he had 9.5 last year for the Colts. So this defense, I don't trust it as much to be productive, to be a unit that will really help the offense, to complement the offense. Maybe it turns around. Like I said, Eddie Jackson has had a really good career. When he started, he was a baller. And he did have 4 interceptions last year, but he gave up more yards. He didn't quite have the impact that he normally does. But maybe he's 29. He's maybe still has something left in the tank. But oddly enough, it's crazy to say this because you're talking about the Chicago Bears. I trust their offense more than I trust their defense. And I'm a Justin Fields fan. I think Justin Fields is a good quarterback. You just need to give him the tools to prove it. And I think they have. It's not great. It's better than it was, is what I'll say about their talent. And DJ Moore is a great add. So it's a huge season for Justin Fields. It's a huge season for Matt Eberflus. For the entirety of this team, because you finished dead last in the NFL last year, and you didn't take a quarterback with the first pick. You could have had Bryce Young. You could have traded Justin Fields. They decided not to do it. Instead, you add an offensive lineman in Darnell Wright with the 10th pick, and you get DJ Moore as a number 1 wide receiver to complement the quarterback that you currently have on the roster. I think Justin Fields is going to have a good season. I think him being in the MVP conversation is crazy. Anybody making that argument, I think they really just think about it for a second. Anybody who's in the MVP conversation has to be on a team that is one of the best in the league. You at least have to be in the playoffs. to be in the MVP conversation. The Chicago Bears are not going to be a playoff team. And quite honestly, this is tough to say, I think they're going to finish dead last in their division again. I think they're going to be better. I think they'll win more games because I think this division is going to be a hell of a lot closer than it was. The Bears will be better. The Packers, I think, will be better than people expect. Minnesota won't be as good as they were last year, so they won't just swallow up wins. The Lions won't be as good as people think. So I think this division will be close, but I do expect the Bears to finish dead last again. Because yes, you had a number one receiver, and sure, okay, you do a couple things, and I like the basis of your team more, but they still have to do better with this group to expect Super Bowl aspirations, to expect a division title. Because this roster isn't good enough to win a division. So I think the Bears have done a good job at spending money and building a better team than they had the year before. And you can't do it all in one offseason because you only have so much money and you only have so much resources. They made deals so they have draft picks next year to continue to improve your team. It happens all the time. Cincinnati has been competitive for years, but you have to remember they've never won a Super Bowl. They might have a better team right now than they have the entirety of Joe Burrow's career, as I touched on in the AFC North preview show. The Detroit Lions did not make the playoffs last year. They are talked about as if they did. They're on the come up. They had a great season. I think the Bears could have one of those years this season where they just miss, and they might still finish dead last in the division because the Packers might be better than people expect. And the Vikings had a turnover, but I think that's where this is going. It'll be a disappointment because you missed the playoffs, of course. It's always a disappointment. But if we're really being logical, and I'm telling all of you right now, the Bears are not going to make the playoffs. But will they have the Bears will have a positive season if Justin Fields has more touchdowns than interceptions, if he has twice as many passing yards as he does rushing yards, if he drops his carries to under 70, 80 maybe in a season, no significant injuries, and you see him throw from the pocket, have success, I think you take that. I think you take that, and I think the Bears brass look at themselves and say, you know what? We have our quarterback of the future. We like Matt Eberflus. We just need to continue to push the envelope. We need to continue to push to get to the top of the mountain and be in the conversation with these other teams. Because even though the NFC is weaker than the AFC, the Bears aren't on that level yet. And I think internally they know this. They should know this, but they'll learn as the year goes on. I don't like to be overly negative, but I think this NFL season is interesting because, yes, there's going to be bad teams. But I think the league is close. I think a lot of teams aren't that far off from each other. When you look around and go, wow, that team's good, but they're not great. Well, this team's good, not great. Well, what separates them? How does it go down? Teams are going to lose games. It happens every year. It happens every week. Two teams play. One team wins, another team loses. The way pro sports work. I think there'll be games that the Bears would have lost last year that they find a way to squeak out one or two of those wins this year. And I don't think they'll be picking in the top 5 of the draft. Because I think there's worse teams than them, and I think they're going to find ways to be competitive and win some games in the NFC North. Let's go to the hype train next. We'll keep the Vikings because the Vikings technically finished first in the division last year. The Detroit Lions under Dan, aka Man Campbell. I like the Detroit Lions. I like Dan Campbell. Jared Goff had a fantastic season last year. And I think they got a good team. They had one of the best drafts. I'll even add that to the Detroit Lions. I think a great draft, actually. They did phenomenal. I like the team. But the way the Detroit Lions are being discussed, the way they're being bet on and talked about, that scares me. I like a team that flies underneath the radar, that you don't see coming. It's one thing to boast about the Kansas City Chiefs or the Cincinnati Bengals. The Detroit Lions have proven nothing. The Detroit Lions have done nothing for anybody to trust them. They did not make the play. I'm going to reiterate this. They did not make the playoffs last year, and it's talked about as if they did. That's why the Bears could be in that same position come next offseason when they're being discussed. They were one game out. They needed another victory. They would have made the postseason. They were so close, but it was a good story. You love Dan Campbell. And Aaron Rodgers is gone. The Vikings retool. It has to be the year for the Detroit Lions to win this division, right? I don't know. All I know is that the hype train is chugging along the train tracks, and what people don't want to happen in Detroit is that they do not want this train to be Pelham 1, 2, 3, where it just goes completely off the rails. Okay, they need to keep this tame. They need to just rein it in. Don't be Travolta on the train, okay? Just calm. Just be Detroit. Be no expectations. But they have a lot of them now, which concerns me. Now, Troy, same coaching staff. Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator. They did not lose him in the offseason, which was a huge surprise and a really good aid for this team. Jared Goff was a top 10 rated quarterback last year when it comes to QBR, PFF, the advanced metrics. Jared Goff was doing everything right. Less than 10 interceptions. Incredibly impressive. 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. 61.1 QBR, which was good for 5th in the NFL. Phenomenal year. What did they do to improve over the summer? Well, Cam Sutton, longtime Pittsburgh Steeler, leaves Pittsburgh to come to Detroit because Detroit's worst part of their team last year was their defense, 30th in the NFL. They added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who was on a one-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. He is now a member of the Detroit Lions, has been a great player over the course of his career. David Montgomery comes over from the Chicago Bears to Detroit. They had Marvin Jones Jr. from Jacksonville, Alex Anzalone from New Orleans. Graham Glasnow comes over, they re-sign him, and Jermaine Ifedi comes over from the Bears. Now they do lose DJ Chark, Jamal Williams left for New Orleans, Deshaun Elliott, Mike Hughes. They traded Jeff Okudah to the Atlanta Falcons, and Trey Flowers was released and is now a member of the Patriots once again. Out of their adds and losses, Cam Sutton, like the ad, they needed help at corner. You trade that out for Okudah. Sutton is more, you know what he is at this point. Detroit wants to be a playoff team. Okudah is still trying to find himself after injuries and being a third overall pick. Hasn't worked out. I don't mind that. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you get him for a low number. He didn't have a huge market in the offseason, which was surprising to me. For the Detroit Lions to end up with him after he was playing in the Super Bowl and was a huge part of the Philadelphia Eagles defense, love that. David Montgomery, we'll get to that. I want to save that piece. Marvin Jones Jr., solid receiver, was good with Trevor Lawrence. And I look at, again, you trade that out. I'd rather have Jamal Williams than David Montgomery personally, but that's just me. Trey Flowers had to go. So I like it. Plus their draft. They get Jahmyr Gibbs at at the 12th overall pick, running back out of Alabama. Incredibly versatile, really solid back. I didn't expect him to go 12th overall, but he was great in college. I think he'll be good in the pros. They get Jack Campbell out of Iowa, one of the best linebackers in the entirety of the draft, one of the best defensive players in the draft, and he had the best ratings for what it's worth of any rookie in week 1 of the preseason. Sam Laporta, they grab at 34, another tight end who, yes, this is the big thing for him. He played at Iowa. Playing at Iowa basically means you get no statistics because they don't know how to do anything effectively at Iowa. They suck on. They have the worst offense in the NCAA. You bet the under every week, you make money. He still had 657 yards receiving. He can block. He's strong. I like Sam Laporta. In particular, with Dan Campbell, I think he'll fit in well. They get Brian Branch at 45. He was a safety at Alabama, really good, like him. And they get Hendon Hooker with the 68th pick. He's a guy not going to play this year, obviously, with Jared Goff. And he's got currently has a torn ACL, but he's got a lot of potential. Was having a hell of a year at Tennessee last season before his injury, was in the Heisman discussion. So Hendon Hooker, to get him with the 68th pick and just scoop him up, I don't mind that as well. This team's loaded with talent. Armon St. Brown made huge strides last year for the Detroit Lions. Huge. He was Jared Goff's main man. 1,161 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, over 100 catches. Jameson Williams didn't get to play much. He'll miss the first 6 games of the year because he was gambling on games. When he comes back, I think he'll be great. They also have Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond. They added Denzel Mims from the Jets, and I mentioned Marvin Jones Jr. Again, this is the Montgomery signing that I don't get. They added David Montgomery from the Bears, and they pay him decent money. And then they take Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th pick. I like having 2 running backs. I get that. Makes sense. I just think if I'm going to keep a back, I draft Jahmyr Gibbs. I would have re-signed Jamal Williams personally because Jamal Williams is a guy that is phenomenal in the red zone. He's a touchdown machine, and he's a different, it's kind of a ice and fire, 2 different styles. I think David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, they're similar in what they can do. Jahmyr Gibbs is more shifty. Montgomery had 801 yards rushing last year. He's a solid back. That's just a personal preference. I would have went a different way. But on offense, the weapons, and really, this offense is less about the weapons for Jared Goff and the way the scheme works. See, he hits a lot of open receivers. They do a lot of play action. He finds guys in stride. It's not a lot of, okay, I need to make these really difficult throws where I'm putting the ball in harm's way. They're very smart. Ben Johnson is about diagramming an offense that is pretty simplistic for a quarterback that is good, not great. But I appreciate the way Ben has done it, the way he's taken Jared Goff and said, this is what you do well. You're a game manager, but you can throw the football well. You understand the position very effectively, and we're gonna continue to do it. And that's why I say I think this team has a very good coaching staff. Aaron Glenn, his defense struggled last year. A lot of that was personnel. We'll see if his scheme change will help. I like having two-headed monster at running back. Again, I would have changed that, so I think that's another thing. Maybe the biggest strength of this team, more than the receivers and Jared Goff, their offensive line. I love their offensive line. I think it's going to be up there with the best. I don't think it's better than Philly's, because I think Philly is the gold standard, but I think it's one of the best. Taylor Decker at left tackle, Jonah Jackson at left guard, Frank Ragnow at center, Haloi Vaitai, and Penei Sewell. And they had Glasgow and they have Jermaine Ifedi as depth pieces to plug into that offensive line if injuries come up. Love it. Love it. Again, top 5 unit, and maybe it's right up there with Eagles, Cowboys, San Francisco. I mean, this is an elite group. All these guys have gotten good snaps. I mean, Vaitai won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. Taylor Decker's been a longtime member of the Detroit Lions. So a lot of these guys have been together a long time. They played with one another. They have cohesion. So that's a huge strength of this group. And they all played together last season. So you come back together. You have that you have that feel from the jump, what it's going to be like to play with one another. So you keep the same coaching staff. You keep your quarterback. You keep your offensive line. St. Brown was on the team last year. Josh Reynolds was on the team last year. Khalif Raymond was on the team last year. Brock Wright, the backup tight end, was on the team last year. Jason Kaminda, the fullback. You had Laporta, Marvin Jones Jr., and Jahmyr Gibbs. But as a running back, that's plug and play. Marvin Jones Jr., he's bounced around his career to different teams to play. And he's had success with pretty much every quarterback he's played with. And I think he'll help Jameson Williams, because I think he needs to grow up a little bit. He had 529 yards, 3 touchdowns last year to Jameson Williams with Jacksonville. So really, really strong offensive team, strong foundation, good coaching, good scheme. The weaknesses of this team. Well, it was the defense. It was the defense, and I give them credit. They've improved it. So Cam Sutton's going to play corner. I expect C.J. Gardner-Johnson to play safety ahead of Kirby Joseph, even though he's not listed there in the depth chart right now. Brian Branch, we'll see if he gets some free safety snaps. Jack Campbell is going to be their will linebacker. He's already earned that job. Anzalone and Malcolm Rodriguez are battling out for middle linebacker. It's better than it was. They have Aiden Hutchinson, who they took second overall, who had a great rookie year, 9.5 sacks, 3 interceptions. I think his sack number can go up. I don't know if it will, and here's why. The one thing they didn't really improve is other guys. Charles Harris had 1 sack last season. Romeo Okwara had 1 sack last season. Alan McNeil had 1. So you're looking at other guys that are going to potentially rush the quarterback. Not exactly. Alex Anzalone only had 1.5 sacks. Derek Barnes had 0. So my biggest concern is, will they generate pressure on the opposing team's quarterbacks? I think this team is going to tackle a hell of a lot better. Anzalone is a very good tackler in space. 77 last year. I think Jack Campbell, he's a rookie, but I think he'll be great from jump. And I think their safety and the back end of their defense is better. Branch, Gardner-Johnson, Cam Sutton, I like all of it. But do they generate enough pressure on opposing quarterbacks? If you think Justin Fields can move around, if you don't, If he has time to move around the pocket, he can create plays using his legs, or you let a play develop, he can throw the ball down the field. Jordan Love, again, play action. If you're running the football down their throat and then you have to get a big sack on third down, you don't get any pressure. There's openings down the field for Jordan Love to hit guys for huge gains. So that is the weakness of the Detroit Lions. Because I like the middle of their defense. I think the back end of their defense is improved. They noticed that it was a problem. And I think Aiden Hutchinson is a really, really good prospect. He's entering his second season, 9.5 sacks as a rookie on a team that was one of the worst defenses in the NFL. That's a really good season. I would say for him, what he can do is try to improve his run defense, help in the tackling department, and create some opportunities for you to get some one-on-ones. But I think for him, he's going to get a lot of double teams this season. Can he deal with that? Is he going to get frustrated? And just my other weakness is the hype. This team is being talked about a lot. They're playing on opening night against the Kansas City Chiefs. How does everybody piece together at the back end of the defense? Jared Goff has a great season. Can he follow it up in Detroit? On paper, this team is the best team in the division. Bar none. I just think overall depth-wise, if you look at each player and you go, well, that's a good player. That's a good player. That's a good player. You might say, okay, well, Kirk Cousins is better than Jared Goff. I think it's a debate. I would take Kirk Cousins personally. I think Kirk Cousins is better than Jared Goff because he's proven it more. He's gotten his team to the play. Yes, Jared Goff's been to a Super Bowl, but he also had Sean McVay as his coordinator. But it's not far behind. But if you say, okay, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, okay, maybe he's a little bit better. Running back position. Well, we're better than Minnesota now. They no longer have Dalvin Cook. Receiver, okay, I'll give that to Minnesota because they have Justin Jefferson, obviously. But other than Justin Jefferson, we like our group. Tight ends, well, it's close. Offensive line, obviously Detroit. Defense, both teams, that was the weakness. Minnesota, 13-4. They had a bottom 5 defense in the NFL last year. Detroit was a game out from making the playoffs. They were a bottom 3 defense in the NFL last year. So I think part of this for Detroit this year is just staying humble, staying the underdog and Dan Campbell, I think, will do a good job of doing this because he's an underdog. How did he ever get a head coaching job? How did he make the NFL as a tight end that wasn't all that talented? He just did it through hard work and work ethic and grunt. So that's what this team has to embody. Because I think if they embody a team that's a favorite with bravado, I don't think that's going to work. That's not who this team is at their core. Detroit's a city. The Detroit Lions are a team that has been irrelevant for a very long time. And they're on the precipice of getting to the postseason, finding some success, and finding a footing. And for Detroit, they're in a position now where their division is wide open. The Grim Reaper, the quarterback that's owned them for 20 years, is in New York City. They can look around and say, we can take anybody in this division, which they can. But it's about saying, you know what, every week we need to go out there and prove it. Every game we have to prove ourselves, show people who we are. Going into this season, should Detroit be the betting favorite to win this division? Yes. I'm not comfortable saying they're going to yet. I will before the season starts. I need to look at games. I need to figure this out. But are they the best team on paper? Absolutely. Absolutely there. But my only point is, Kansas City goes in as the prohibitive favorite in the AFC West. I understand that. Cincinnati goes in as the prohibitive favorite in the AFC North. I get that. But they've proven it. These teams. We know the names of these teams. The Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, we get that. We understand that going and why. Detroit is such a prohibitive favorite in their own division, and yet they haven't won a division title since Matthew Stafford never won a divisional title in Detroit his whole time there. Matthew Stafford, Super Bowl champion with the Rams, never won a division title with Detroit, and he played there for a fucking decade. Isn't that staggering? You would have thought he would have. Matthew Stafford with Megatron and those teams? Nope. Never happened. Barry Sanders, Barry Sanders on the team last time the Detroit Lions won the division title. Let me look that up quickly, because that's Detroit Lions last. I know it's something crazy. (1993) was the last time the Detroit Lions won their division. That was when the 30-year drought for Canadian NHL teams to win a Stanley Cup, that's been going on for the Detroit Lions. And I know if my good pal Adam Beers listen to this, must sound like just I'm trying to hurt him. I'm not. I'm just pointing out how bad it's been. This isn't to be mean. This is just a fact. 1993. I was not born the last time the Detroit Lions won the division title. So you can understand my skepticism of why, okay, yes, they have the best team, but Detroit's kind of like Dallas, but it's more negative. What can go wrong will go wrong with Detroit. You got Stafford, the best fantasy quarterback in the history of fantasy quarterbacks, which is the dumbest thing ever, fantasy football. But again, it's a whole other story for another day. We got Megatron and Stafford and all these players and still can't win a division title. But yeah, 1993, the last time the Detroit Lions won a division title. And as we enter the season, they are on FanDuel plus 145. But then it goes Minnesota plus 260, Green Bay plus 350, Chicago plus 430. A prohibitive favorite. Plus 120 on certain books. Plus 140 on DraftKings. You get Green Bay at plus 380. Just saying. Plus 400 in certain books. Oh, this is why I love the NFL, because anything can happen. But Detroit Lions are a very good team. Very good team. The Minnesota Vikings were 13-4 last season. Remember that? 13-4. First year head coach Kevin O'Connell. They go 13-4, Kirk D. Cousins. And yet it was an off season of purging for the Vikings. No, they didn't kill anybody, but they did shed off a lot of veterans. Adam Thielen released, Carolina Panther. Dalvin Cook released, New York Jet. Eric Kendricks cut, LA Charger. Patrick Peterson cut, where'd he go? Pittsburgh Steelers. Irv Smith Jr. cut, Cincinnati Bengals. All of these players played at least 3 years on the Vikings. Thielen played a decade. Cook played 6. Kendricks played 9. Peterson played 4. A long time. But the defense was terrible. They were getting older. They didn't want to pay Dalvin Cook the money like everybody else in the NFL, so they pivoted. But it's crazy to see all these players go, and you go 13-4, you win a division title, you have a great season. But here we are. They add Marcus Davenport to try to improve the pass rush. They get Byron Murphy Jr. brought over from the Arizona Cardinals. They re-sign Garrett Bradbury. Dean Lowry comes over from the Green Bay Packers. Josh Oliver, tight end, brought over, and they draft Jordan Addison in the first round out of USC. So, and also they have a new defensive coordinator in Brian Flores, who comes over, who was with the Steelers last year, formerly the Dolphins head coach, has been a very effective defensive coordinator in his career. Strengths of this team. Again, this is going to sound. I like Kirk D. Cousins. He's not a great quarterback. He'll have his games where you want to wring his neck, certainly. But overall, Kirk Cousins, 29 touchdowns, the 14 interceptions. You want that number to go down, obviously. 4,500 passing yards. But I think overall, he's a quarterback that will take. He's often plagued with a guy who doesn't take any risks, probably because the last play of the season was so ugly with that check down to TJ Hawkinson against the New York Giants. But he will throw the ball down the field. He'll make the occasional mistake. But you have Justin Jefferson. They draft Jordan Addison. KJ Osborne had a very good year. And he was a number 2, number 3 receiver. But he had 650 yards, 5 touchdowns. They got TJ Hawkinson from the Detroit Lions at the trade deadline last year. I love TJ Hawkinson, personally, another guy. He had almost 1,000 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. So offensively, they lose Dalvin Cook. Alexander Mattison's been on this team for a long time as that number 2 back. He's very similar. He looks just like Dalvin Cook. They run the same. I do think Dalvin Cook is better than Alexander Mattison, but it's not a bad trade-off to go from Cook to him. They are still in a good spot at the running back position. So offensively, I think they're in a good position because they still have the same weapons. Jordan Addison, I think, will be used primarily in the slot. Was very good at USC. You have Osborne, Jefferson on the outside, Osborne in the slot, Hawkinson and Oliver, and honestly Johnny Mont, their third string tight end, is a guy that can make plays as well. So they're in a good place there. Offensive line. I think it's better. It's different than it was last year. Darrisaw's back at left tackle. Bradbury, Ed Ingram. But they don't have a whole lot of depth. That's one thing I'll say about them. They don't have, if there's an injury, I think they're in trouble. They have a number of guys who are getting a little, long in the tooth, and you can be long in the tooth 30 in the NFL when it comes to an offensive lineman because you've been through the ringer. But it's different. They had Ed Ingram from LSU. We'll see what he can do. Christian Darrisaw has had his ups and downs, but he's a younger. He's 24 years old, still trying to find his game at left tackle. So, and you saw last year, if you watched the quarterback documentary, Kirk Cousins hurt his ribs early in the season. He had to battle his way through it basically the entire season. So this team, and Kirk's 34. He's not a spring chicken. So if this offensive line can come together, I think it's a fringe strength, but it can also be a weakness because I don't love the depth that they have, and it's a different but similar group to last year. Strength, Brian Flores. This defense was awful last year. Brian Flores can only help it. You had Byron Murphy. Lewis Sign, I think, is going to get more snaps, who's their first-round pick out of Georgia. They get Harrison Smith to stay on a new contract for less money. Marcus Davenport add to the linebacking core. Jordan Hicks is still on the team. They keep him. Harrison Phillips also stays. I think this defense on paper doesn't look all that good. It doesn't look all that good. But I want to see what Brian Flores can do with it. Because his defenses didn't look all that good in Miami. But after he left, they weren't any good because they didn't have that good of talent. Like last year, the Dolphins' defense wasn't very good. Brian Flores goes to Minnesota and he hopes to revamp this group. And sometimes it's just really good coaching, putting guys in good matchups. Danielle Hunter, can he still bring it? He had 10.5 sacks last year. I think he'll still be good again. To me, he's their best defensive player. He's been the key. Dean Lowry was in Green Bay for a long time, only had half a sack last year. They need more from him. So, the other thing for Minnesota, you're due for regression. You go 13-4. Are you going to go 13-4 again? Unlikely. And just, you got a lot of good bounces last year. They had the most wins by one score in one season in the history of the NFL. Are you going to get that lucky against the ball going to bounce your way? Is Josh Allen going to fumble the ball in the end zone, then you score? Can Justin Jefferson make that catch like he did against the Bills once again? But Kirk Cousins enters the last year of his contract. They have not extended him. So he's a lame duck entering this year. This could be his last year in Minnesota. And they said they're not going to re-sign him before the season starts. And you cut a whole lot of veterans that he's good friends with Adam Thielen. I'm sure he's good friends with Dalvin and Eric Kendricks. And you're bringing in new pieces. After going 13-4, it looks really strange. I think the Vikings view themselves as they are still in win now mode and they believe that they could win a Super Bowl. Which is far-fetched, but it's also realistic at the same point of view because they're in the NFC. And okay, well, if you win a couple games, you're there. Sure, you look at the Eagles and they're daunting and they're a very good team. And you think the Cowboys are better than the Vikings. The Cowboys crushed the Vikings by like 45 points last year. We also say we won 13 games. We have a team that we're confident in. Maybe we can make this happen, which who knows. The Vikings open against the Buccaneers at home. Then the Vikings go to the Eagles on Thursday night. They played Monday night last year to start the week 2. Yeah, so they got week 2 again, this time on Thursday. That's a tough game in Philly. Then they play the Chargers. Go to Carolina. Host the Chiefs. Jesus, that's not an easy start. Play the Bears. So I think for the Vikings this season, winning divisional games is going to be huge. I mean, Detroit still, this division has to play the AFC West. So Detroit has to play Kansas City, and Detroit has to play Denver, and Detroit has to play the Chargers. So there's tricky opponents there, and they have to play the NFC North, so the NFC West. So there's tough games. I like the Vikings team, but I don't think they'll be good as they were last year, even though I agree with some of their decisions defensively, bringing in new pieces and cutting away veterans that just weren't helping the team anymore. But sometimes you have one great season and the next year it just doesn't translate. Kirk Cousins is a year older. Everybody on this team's a year older. They're still not a young team, I would say. They're an experienced group that is hoping to kind of catch lightning in a bottle and see what happens. But it's an uphill battle for this team to be as successful, to be as competent as they were last season. So that's the NFC North. I'm going to give predictions on every division winner as we get closer to the season. It's because I want to go through every game and go through who each team plays, which division teams play, and how they're going to win games and things of that nature. And I'll pick every team that makes the playoffs, pick a Super Bowl winner eventually. So that's all forthcoming in the coming weeks. Later this week, we'll talk about the AFC East. A lot to talk about there, with the craziness in New York and the Dolphins and the Patriots. So that's coming, and then we'll do the NFC East next week, AFC East, and we just have the West divisions to wrap up, and then we'll get into some college football and quarterback rankings and different offenses that I like. So still lots to come. Be back with a regular show tomorrow. Got some news on the U.S. Open that we'll talk about tomorrow that was just came through before I went live today. Jamal Murray's not going to play for Canada at the FIBA World Cup. I don't blame him. Just won an NBA championship. Again, it'd be nice to play for his country, but it's not as if it's the Olympics. You win it again. You want to play for your country, but I've always been of the opinion, I've kept this consistent. You win a championship, you shouldn't have to play for your country if you don't want to. And it's the same thing about the Olympics, and it's the same thing. It's always, well, why don't they do this during the season? Because it's stupid for business, and people don't get it. And I've made that opinion 1,000 times, and I have to talk to people about it. But to me, it's really simple. It doesn't make the NHL any money. It doesn't make the NBA any money, the FIBA World Cup. So why would you want your players to play in it? You wouldn't. Denver is happy because Jokic and Jamal Murray are both not playing in the FIBA World Cup. And yes, I'm sure Serbia and Canada are upset that the respective countrymen aren't playing, but they can do absolutely jack shit about it. So they'll get over it. But that's a story for another day. New pod tomorrow, AFC East preview later in the week. I appreciate the support. Hope you guys are enjoying these preview shows because they're a lot of fun to dive into for me personally. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Talk to you tomorrow. To the point.